All right, good day, class. Welcome to Chapter 12, Visual Impairments. Hopefully, you're enjoying not having to come in on Thursday for your lecture. So, we're going to be covering the visual impairment chapter, and then I also put some additional information up on Blackboard, so make sure you check out those documents, and also make sure that you watch the YouTube video that is posted. So, many people are pretty familiar with the eye chart, which is to the lower right of the screen here, which is used to actually, test our vision acuity and how well our vision is. So make sure when we meet back up for class that you're able to kind of tell me what does it mean if you have 20/20 vision, and that kind of relates to the eye chart. The other picture is actually a clip art with an individual who has visual impairment that's using a cane, which is actually known as a white cane for those with visual impairments. And that cane is actually used to help facilitate learning about the environment through the use of that cane. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we actually do some activities. So let's get started. So the definition of visual impairments through IDEA is also including blindness. And the most important thing to remember is that it's a deficiency in vision that, even when corrected, adversely affects a child's education performance. So that doesn't mean someone that has a slight visual impairment and then is able to get corrective glasses, that wouldn't really fall under visual impairment. So they have to have a significant amount of vision loss that, even with any corrective lenses, contacts, surgery, that vision cannot be repaired. And as always, with all of our definitions, this adversely affects the child's education performance. So it includes both those with a visual impairment, partial sight, and then all the way to total blindness. So in the book, it has this table about the classification of visual impairments. And visual impairment, like we've been learning, these umbrellas, is really the umbrella term that encompasses both total blindness and visual impairment, which really is the preferred kind of language and verbal use instead of partial sight. But when people talk about partial sight, it means that they are able to read. They probably need some sort of magnification or large print. Blindness is an inability to read large print, even with magnification. Legal blindness, some of your friends, you might say, yeah, I'm legally blind. So that's having an acuity of 20/200 or less in your better eye, even with the best correction, and a field of 20 degrees or less in diameter in the better eye. And we'll talk about acuity and field loss in a little bit. Travel vision is being able to see at 5 to 10 feet what the normal eye can see at 200 feet. So we're looking at 5/200 or 10/2000. Motion perception, really the ability to see only like 3 to 5 feet in front of them. Light perception is the ability to distinguish between strong light, such as like the sun or a flashlight in their eye. And majority of people that are considered blind actually have light perception. So they're able to see some shadows and some really strong lights. It's a very, very small percent of people that actually have total blindness where they're not able to recognize any strong light and they really have zero vision. It's really only about 1 to 2% of the population. So let's talk a little bit more about acuity and field loss. So acuity is really the clarity of our vision. So if we go back to that eye chart, it's the ability to be able to read the letters because they come in clear. So most of that comes from the retinal part of the eye, which allows us to focus and really be able to see sharpness of objects. All right. And so making sure that the retina is functioning correctly and it's healthy is going to allow us to have accurate acuity. And we also need to make sure that our brain, through our optic nerve, is able to analyze what we are seeing and send it to the brain. Now, field loss is actually our areas of vision. So we have central vision and then we also have peripheral vision. And as humans, hopefully you know the degree of angle that we're actually able to see, which is different from some other animals that have less of a degree or more of a degree of vision. So kind of when you're looking straight ahead at your central, you can see a far amount of distance to both your left and your right, and that's really your peripheral or side vision. So if someone has field loss areas, then they actually have some sort of a blind spot. And this picture here on the slide actually shows central vision loss. So meaning the central part of their vision is blacked out or blurry, and that's loss. And some other will have peripheral loss, and then some will actually just have blind spots or vision loss in specific areas. And they usually break it down into quadrants. So in sport, the International Blind Association, Sport Association, they have separate visual classifications. And so they have a B1, a B2, and a B3. Here in the US, United States Association of Blind Athletes actually has a class 4. But you're able to compete in the US, but really you can't go on to any international competitions because a B4 actually doesn't qualify as having a significant visual impairment for specific blind sports. So B1 is your most severe vision loss, so no light perception either eye, up to light perception, okay? But the inability to recognize shape, hands at any distance or any direction. So pretty much that's blindness right there. B2 looks at a visual acuity of 20 to 600 in the better eye or less than 5 degrees of that visual field loss. And then B3 is 2600 up to 2200 or 20 degrees, less than 20 degrees but more than 5 in their best eye with correction. And then in the US, we use B4 classification, which is 2200 to 2070 and a larger than 20 degree of vision field in the best eye with eye correction. So that's specific to sport. So you would actually get classified based off your vision for when you compete in sport activities. So it's, pretty common who you're competing against based off of them having the same vision loss. But some sports, you actually wear blindfolds. So it doesn't really matter what your vision classification is. Just really depends on the sport. So what are some types of vision loss? The book kind of covers these. They're a little bit more common, but there are a ton of different types of vision loss. So we're just going to touch base on these. Remember, as we've learned before, there's congenital and then there's acquired. And actually, when it comes to vision loss, acquired is actually called adventitious, which is still acquired. It happens later on in life. Congenital means that they're going to be born with that vision loss right away. So albinism is the first one we're going to talk about. It's an inherited genetic condition that actually reduces the melanin pigment formed in your skin, hair, and eyes. And so there's really no pigment of color in their skin, their hair, and their eyes. And it occurs in all racial groups, ethnic groups around the world. The occurrence is usually about 1 to about every 20,000 people in the US will have some type of albinism. One of the common myths about albinism is that people think that people with albinism have red eyes, which they don't. They actually have various different colors of eyes, but it's mostly because of the lack of that pigment that it doesn't look like it has any color. And the red that some people see is really just the blood vessels that we're seeing from the back of the eye, but they do not actually have red eyes. So let's talk about vision when it comes to people with albinism. So most of the time their vision problems are not able to be corrected with eyeglasses, and many of them have low vision due to abnormal development of that retina and also abnormal kind of patterns of the optic nerve sending information to the brain. But there's a wide variety of differences in albinism when it comes to vision. And there's many different complications in addition to that lack of pigment that individuals with albinism might have. One is called nystagmus, which is this horizontal back and forth quick movement of the eyes. There's strabismus, which is actually what some people would define as crossed eyes or lazy eyes. So it's a muscle imbalance. Photophobia is one of the number one symptoms, and that's sensitivity to bright light and glare because they don't have a full retina to be able to block that light coming through. They also have some misrouting of the optic nerve, sending vision waves up into the brain. And the iris, which is the colored area of the eye has little to no pigment, and so that light that normally enters just through our pupil is actually able to enter through their pupil and their iris, so allowing them to be very sensitive to light. For the most part, treatment usually consists of visual rehabilitation, some surgery to really improve the appearance, but as far as surgery to improve vision or optic nerve waves to the brain, that's really not done yet. So most people prefer to not really be in darkness, but not just be in bright, bright light. So many individuals with albinism have to wear sunglasses. They should be wearing hats. They should be able to definitely be wearing a ton of sunscreen all the time because they don't have any pigment in their skin. All right, next one, ROP, retinitis of prematurity. So this is an eye disease that occurs in some premature babies that are born before 31 weeks. Now remember, full pregnancy is 38 to about 42 weeks. Also, premature infants weighing about 2 3/4 pounds or less. And this disorder usually develops in both eyes and is one of the most common causes of vision loss in childhood that can eventually lead to lifelong visual impairment and blindness. It was first diagnosed in 1942. So what is ROP? Well, it occurs when there's an abnormal blood vessel growth in the back of the retina. And so it kind of builds up this tissue in the back of the eye. And so the retina senses that light and sends signals to the brain so you can see. But the abnormal blood vessels actually kind of are fragile, they leak, they can scar the retina, they can pull it out of position where it's not really able to send that information to the brain correctly. Now, one of the major things that you need to be aware about is actual retinal detachment. And if retinal detached completely, that's going to cause a full blindness. So we have to be really careful that they don't have any impact to their head or to their eyes, headbutting a soccer ball, anything like that that could cause injury to that retinal detachment and lead it to further detach would significantly decrease their vision. So, moving on. Retinoblastoma. So this actually can be congenital or acquired just because there's really there's no symptoms at first. And so usually does not get diagnosed until later in life, but always before the age of 5. And really it's a type of cancer that forms in the retina. And so the pupil kind of appears to be white when light shine into the eye, and they have difficulties with flash photography, and the eyes kind of appear to be looking in different directions because of the eye that's coming in due to the cancer. And really treatments are just like any other cancer: chemotherapy, radiation, and then laser therapy as well. So now we're going to move on to macular degeneration, which is an acquired vision loss. And this causes loss in the central area of field vision. It's usually due to either dry macular degeneration, so the center of the retina actually deteriorates, or there's another condition called wet macular degeneration, where there's leaky blood vessels kind of grow under the retina, which throws off the vision. Now, the retina, that back layer of the eye that you can see in the picture, it records the images we see and sends it to the brain through the optic nerve. Now, the retinal's central portion is known as the macula. And so this is responsible for really focusing on central vision in the eye and controls our eye to be able to really kind of look at those fine details of reading, driving in a car, recognize faces, colors, and objects in fine details. So for those beginning to have macular degeneration, usually there's blurred vision is one of the key symptoms in their central area, and then they eventually leads to central field loss. The cause for this, there's age macular degeneration because of the deterioration. Genetics can also be a cause, and same with environmental factors. One disease called Stargardt is actually impacts those that are of younger age that the macular degenerates. So, all right, moving on. RP, retinitis pigmentosus. So this is a group of kind of rare genetic disorders that really break down and lose the cells of the retina. And the common symptoms with this is one, difficulty seeing at night, because there's really none of that light that is present at night isn't getting back. And then also a loss of peripheral or side vision. So we have two types of photoreceptors in our retina, and we have the rods and the cones, which you can kind of see at the back of the eye on the picture. So the rods are usually more severely affected than the cones. And the rods, when the rods die, people usually experience what's called night blindness. And so they're really, at nighttime when there's not a lot of vision, they're not able to see. And then there's a progression loss of their visual field, starting from the outside, the sides. The loss of the rods then eventually leads to the breakdown and the loss of the cones. And then that really kind of deteriorates the peripheral vision to what is known as tunnel vision. So only really central vision that they're able to see. So children often have difficulty getting around in the dark and usually will need more assistance when the sun sets because of the restricted visual field and visual acuity. Most of them also find very bright lights uncomfortable, so they're photophobic. And really, it's caused for many different kind of gene disorders. So there's a group of them that could cause it. So it's genetically linked. All right, cortical visual impairment, CVI, is decreased visual response due to an actual neurological problem. So there's nothing actually wrong with the eye in this type of vision loss. It's specifically related to the optic nerve sending signals to the brain. And so a child with CVI might have a normal eye exam and eye looks good, but then they kind of have really weird visual behaviors. So how does a normal eye work? Well, we look at an object, we see it, sends signals through our eye, which then sends signals through the optic nerve to the brain. The brain recognizes the image, integrates it into other sensory messages, hearing, proprioceptive, everything we just talked about before, and then the brain responds to that sensory input. Well, when an individual who has CVI, the eye structure is usually normal, but then that message is not getting properly processed or integrated into the brain correctly. So they kind of have difficulty latching on or really remembering what they're actually seeing because the brain isn't filing it correctly. So CVI is caused by damage to visual parts of the brain. It could be stroke, decreased blood supply, decreased oxygenation, brain malformation or infection, hydrocephalus, remember, pressure on the brain, seizures, head trauma, or possibly any neurological disorders. Next one, glaucoma, which probably many of you know, is really focused on the optic nerve connecting to the brain is damaged because of high pressure in the eye. And as they have this increased pressure, then it could cause more damage to the optic nerve, which then is irreversible, which then can lead to permanent vision loss. So with treatment, they're able to release that pressure. So we need to make sure that that pressure gets released. If not, in a couple years, it could eventually lead to total blindness. Now, cataracts is cloudy on that lens of the eye that you can see in the picture. So that lens, which is supposed to be super clear, gets cloudy, kind of as progressive over the years, which causes blurry vision or frosty kind of fogged window type of vision. And when it interferes with someone's actual activities, they can actually go in now and take that lens out and replace it with the artificial lens, which is pretty amazing, I think. So, what are some affective and social characteristics of individuals with vision loss? Well, they have what's called blindnisms, and we've talked a lot about self-stimulation. So just think, if you're not getting any input through your eyes, then you're going to do multiple different kind of ways to self-stimulate your body. So you might rock back and forth. You might spin. You might kind of press your eye, which I don't know if any of you have ever kind of had a concussion or hit your head hard enough and you see those stars. If you push really hard in your eye, you're actually able to see all those different colors and stars. And those individuals with visual impairment that aren't getting any sensory input through their vision are able to press their eyes and actually see those stars in different colors. And so many of them will do some eye pushing as well as a way to self-stimulate. Also, overprotection. That can come from the parents, that can come from society, teachers. They're just overprotective of that individual with vision loss. So they're afraid of them getting hurt, to be independent. And so what does that cause? Increased dependence. They're going to be dependent on someone always to help them. Help them find their cane, their water bottle. Help them take them to point A to point B. And overall, they actually have a decreased amount of opportunities for socialization and physical activities compared to their peers without vision. Now, what do you think are some others? Now, we know that, if they have vision loss, maybe they have some self-esteem, self-confidence issues, which is going to impact both affective and social characteristics. They might have some social awkwardness just because they're not able to view what everybody else is going on around them. So in your textbook, it talks about motor, physical, and fitness characteristics. So I put down the characteristics that mostly individuals with vision loss usually have some type of motor delay. They usually have postural deviations, issues with their body image, some delays in balance, at times a shuffling walking gait, and also decreased health-related fitness. That can be muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility. So, time for you to do some work. You need to figure out what the implication of that is, and then what is a potential solution to kind of increase those characteristics so that they can lead a healthy, physically fit life. All right, so what are some inclusion strategies when we talk about physical activity and movement? One, equipment modification. If they're not able to see, then we need to provide some auditory cues. So as you can see in this slide, there's a ball that beeps, there's a ball with bells in it, so they're able to track the ball, hear it, and not have to really worry so much about their vision. Also, team teaching. So using peer tutors, paraeducators, and adaptive physical education specialists to really break down those skills and give them one-on-one instruction is needed because they need a ton of additional verbal cues than just visual. And most of the time, we are working in a visual environment. Sorry, water break. So, curriculum inclusion, we want to be able to know the difference between open and closed kind of sport activities. So, an open environment compared to a closed environment. Well, closed environment would be a lot easier. You set the pace, you set how many, there's no interference. So they want to be able to learn the skills that way first. So for instance, I'm dribbling a basketball. I'm just going to go from one cone to another cone that's 5 feet away. It's controlled. It's in a closed environment. An open environment would be offense, defense. I have to dodge. I have to change directions. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult. So you want to have that progression. You might also need to modify some rules. Provide more verbal cues so that that student can be included. And also environmental modifications. So in the two pictures you have here, so the one is I was belaying a girl with a visual impairment on the rock wall. So the rock wall is tactile. She was able to feel a lot of the different holds, but if she got frustrated and couldn't find anything, I would have to give her verbal cues to find it. So ways that would do that would actually be using the clock. I would say right hand 2 o'clock. And then she would be able to kind of move in that area and be able to find the hold. Now, in the bottom, I'm assisting with archery. So I'm lining the student up with his bow to be right on the target, and then he's able to release it. And actually, when we do archery, the target, we actually fill the target with balloons. So the student will know that they hit the target if a balloon pops. So how do we foster independence? What are the main things we have to do with individuals with vision loss? One, we have to maintain a positive attitude. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to break down. We need to be the ones that pick them up and say, no, you can do it. We have to encourage participation. Some participation is better than none. So even if we have to be one-on-one with them and kind of help them through, that's better than them not participating at all. The other thing is we need to break down this barrier of the parents being overprotective. So we need to let the parents be able to see their abilities. And as always with any student with a disability, we always need to challenge them and raise their expectations. All right. We should expect students who are blind and visually impaired to be independent and to be able to advocate for themselves. So if they need assistance, they need to be able to verbally say that to someone and not just stand there and wait. So what are some teaching techniques? Well, clearly verbal explanation, really concise, really to the point, so that you're really explaining exactly everything they need to know. Such as if I said, hey students, come over here. Where is here? You have no clue where here is. Even if I'm pointing to all of you, you're not able to see that right now. So I might say, all the students, I need you to stand with your backs against the window wall. Okay, that at least provides a little bit more concrete information. Now, demonstration and modeling can occur. One, it needs to be occurring in the distance that the individual can see or within their field of vision. And if they have limited vision acuity and field, then we need to provide physical guidance and physical assistance. So we can do what's called tactile modeling. Now what this is I will actually go through the movement and the student will actually feel my body in that movement. And so it's actually called hand under hand, compared to what many people learn as hand over hand manipulation. But hand under hand actually allows the student themselves to be able to have some independence and some control, instead of me kind of putting their body in the motion. As always, using sound device, verbal cues, whole part, whole instruction. Remind me to tell you the story about bowling for that. But it's really kind of telling them the whole part of the activity. Why is it meaningful? Why do they need to learn all these components? Then breaking it into parts. Let's learn each part of it. And then going ahead and then putting it all back together so they understand the sequence. Now, when you watch the video, you'll actually be able to learn about some additional teaching strategies as well. So, guide running techniques, exercise really techniques. There's a variety of them, and we'll get a chance to kind of practice some of them. So, sighted guide, which we now call human guide, because really more than humans can provide sighted guide, is actually where an individual with vision loss will hold the back of your elbow or your wrist, and you will provide them guidance through your body and movements, and you're going to stay one step in front of them. Now, tether is used, which is actually in both of these pictures, is a piece of string that really tethers two people together and allows the guide to give feedback with the tether, but allows more freedom of the movement. You can also use a guide wire, which is anchored in point A, point B with a rope, and then an individual then has a ring or something that they hold onto the rope and they go back and forth down the guide wire. So they're allowed to have independent kind of exercises. I use that many times when I do the pacer test for fitness. You could do circular running, which you actually put a stake in the ground and have a line. And then the individual can just run in circles independently and work on locomotor skills. Not one of my preferred because I would get dizzy and I think it's kind of boring, but it is an option. Sometimes if they have just a visual impairment, really just having a peer or student wearing a very bright shirt that's a color that's preferred and kind of having that person be in front of them, they're able to track them and be a lot more independent. And then they can have independent running and use their own coping skills of hearing and clicking and echolalia. And then a treadmill is a great way as well for them to be independent. So what are some sport opportunities? Well, there's inclusive sports. They should be able to participate in intramural, interscholastic, community-based programs with modifications. And that's where rule modifications and equipment modifications need to occur for them to be included. Now, there's also the United States Association of Blind Athletes, which hosts specific sports and also more sports that are inclusive to everybody, like biking, cycling, track and field. There's also the International Blind Sports Federation. There's the National Beat Baseball Association. And there's also numerous different summer camps for children with vision loss, which The one that I work with is Capabilities, and you can see a couple pictures here about tandem biking. So make sure you guys watch the video that's posted on YouTube. It's about 13 minutes long. Also, check out the supplemental kind of materials that I posted on Blackboard, and bring any questions that you have to our next class. All right? Thank you guys very much.